It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM and AM 1160. Margarita Lopez-Uribe is on the telephone with us this morning. Our usual Bob Pollock segment, but we wanted to talk to Margarita today about bees. We've covered this topic before, and we need to keep track of our bee colony. It's always an issue, and especially in these last 5 years. Margarita, good morning.
Good morning, Todd.
It's good to have you with us here today. So I'm out in the garden the other day, and the bees are just working over those cucumber blossoms like crazy. And I'm thinking, yeah, you go to it, bees. I never found myself cheering for bees before, Margarita, but it's necessary now, isn't it?
It is. It is. They do a lot for us, and, all for free.
Yeah, that's exciting, too. But if you would, as a sort of a primer on how we relate to bees in the agricultural sense, tell me what bees do for us and why we're having such a problem with them now.
Yeah, so the reason why bees are so popular now and we hear more about them is because we have become more aware of these free pollination services. So what they do is that they visit flowers because the babies of the bees eat pollen and nectar. So they visit the flowers to collect food for their babies. And in that process, they are moving pollen between flowers. And that is precisely what plants need to reproduce. And so when, the reason why plants have flowers is because they want to have these very showy, structures that are going to attract these pollinators. And then because plants cannot move, the bees are doing these, transport of pollen between flowers. And that's why we eat a lot of the fruits and veggies that we do, because bees do that for us.
And Extension has been doing some extensive work on the bee colony problems that are afflicting that whole aspect of what's happening outside and the way that bees interact and help us. Tell me where it stands right now as opposed to a year ago when we were getting some really dire news.
Yeah, so I think if I may kind of give you another piece of information that may, broaden a little bit, the view about the pollination problem.
Sure.
So, I think the whole problem with colony collapse disorder kind of initiated in 2006, so it's been, almost 15 years now, we started noticing these problems in honeybee colonies, right? So these bees are the colonies that beekeepers keep, right? We extract honey from them, and those are the bees that a lot of our growers are renting for pollination services. Mm-hmm. After, that started happening, we actually started paying more attention to other bees that are not honeybees, that they are not kept by beekeepers or by humans. They are actually wild bees, and they are also providing very important pollination services. So I think it is an important distinction, and it is important to appreciate that we, that are kind of two different kinds of bees that are going through a lot of trouble. One type is the honeybee that beekeepers keep or have, and then we have all of these other bees that are kind of doing a lot of the pollination services for free. The reason why they are in trouble is, it's very complex. Again, when we started investigating these, 15 years ago, we thought we were going to find the reason why they are in trouble. Now we know that it is a combination of factors. A very important one is that the amount and the type of floral resources that we have for bees has changed dramatically since, we have been converting a lot of natural landscapes into agriculture and urban. So what we need to do right now is try to kind of mediate these changes, right? So we, of course, humans need to eat, we need agriculture, but we can supplement these habitats to provide more diverse floral resources and really support bees. So that's, one of the big problems. Mm-hmm. The second problem is associated with the increasing the toxicity of the pesticides that we're using. So once again, about 20 years ago, we started the pesticides that, like the previous generation of pesticides used to be very unsafe for humans. So now with, technological advancements, we are having pesticides that are much better at killing bees and not having secondary effects to humans. But that means that, the good insects are also being killed. And, that's where bees are falling. So what we're seeing is that, bees are just being exposed to very toxic pesticides. And one other major component is that, we know that we observe that climate is changing. The predictability of climate is not as good as it used to be, right? Like we used to have very predictable summers and winters. The climatic patterns are changing. We're having hotter summers sometimes, or wetter summers, really cold spells in the winter, and then it's really warm. So there are a few studies indicating that these, changes in climate may be correlated with some of the declines of bees that we are observing.
I'm looking at some resources that you sent to me. I think people, if you would ask them, probably would say there are 4 or 5 species of bees. There would be your basic honeybee, your yellow jackets, wasps, hornets, bumblebees, and that's where they would stop. You, in this resource provided to me, there are 437 species of bees in Pennsylvania?
That is correct. And
wow.
I actually facilitated a webinar this week. It's publicly available if anyone wants to check that on the Penn State Extension website. And I went in detail into, this diversity. So yes, we have, yellow jackets are wasps. Paper wasps are wasps, right? Like only bees, within the group of bees, we have 437 species. And about, 420 are native from North America. We have, some that have been introduced, like, for example, the honeybee. The honeybee is not a bee that, evolved here in North America. It was introduced a few centuries ago. The diversity of bees is astonishing. And, I highly encourage you to watch the webinar because I think it's, mind-blowing. I've received a lot of emails with people. There is so much to learn about bees. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's pretty amazing. And, of course, there are some particular plants, flowers, blooming plants of some sort that are going to be the attractants that will bring bees in. It's not like a bee is headed toward the Pennsylvania border and they reach, they're in Ohio, they look at our border and they say, no, they don't have what I want there.
Exactly.
It's a really fluid population, isn't it?
It is.
They move everywhere. So maybe in our visit next week we can get into ways that people can maybe become, real activists in bringing bees into our communities and helping that bee population. Talk, if you would, about the research that is being done in order to strengthen the bee colony and to try to reverse this trend that has been going on.
Yeah. So another thing that I forgot to mention before is that of those 437 species, actually, over 70% of them are solitary. They don't form any colonies. They don't live in bee boxes.
They're loners.
They are loners, yes.
Yeah.
There is only one female in each nest. And most of the bees, actually the ancestor of the bees, most of the bees are ground nesters. So the nest looks a lot more like an ant nest than what we are used to seeing in, a beehive with, hexagons and honey stored. That's an important distinction because it is not only, and we can talk about these more next week, but it is not only about providing flowers, but also places for these bees to nest because they need to have a home. And that's another very important topic of discussion for bee conservation.
Mm-hmm. We think about our buildings and the proximity to humans, and And we sometimes say to ourselves, I don't want bees there. There's a whole forest right beside me. They can go there. Bees are going to go where they want to go, aren't they?
Yes. Yes, well, some can be considered pests because, yes, they do. Sometimes, like there are groups of bees that they like wood, right? Like they have mandibles and they can actually, like open holes in wood, and that can be a little bit problematic. But on the other side, you are providing, like nesting habitat for bees. So there, there's a middle point.
Yeah. We sometimes turn murderous when we think about bees. And I'm not talking about murder hornets. I'm talking about humans that look at bees and say, there's a bee's nest. That thing has to get out of here, and I'm going to attack it. We should be very careful about that, shouldn't we?
Yes, and I think these are conversations that I have every year. So one of the things that happens every spring is that, of course, these brown nesting bees, many of them nest in aggregations, so you can have hundreds of nests in, like in a square feet of area, right? Like they make nests very close to each other, and sometimes they like lawns or areas in people's backyards. And so I get emails, how do I get rid of these bees? I'm scared that they're going to sting me. The good news is that these solitary bees are not aggressive. Yes, they can sting. They do have a stinger, right? The females do have a stinger, but they are not going to go after you or chase you. I've been working with these bees for, over 10 years, and I think I've been stung, like maybe once or twice in my entire life. So it is, like one of the things that I talk to people about, it is try to convince them of the importance and, like the value of keeping them. They're only going to be around for a few weeks of the year. And I would say that 80% of the times I am successful. About 20% of the times, like people have really, good reasons to really get rid of them. And so we try to help them, do that. But the bees are very persistent. Yeah. So, if they like a spot, they most likely will come back.
She is Margarita Lopez-Uribe. She's joined us here this morning, and she's going to come back with us next week as we talk more about bees and how we can help them as they help us. It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS, 101.1 FM, AM 1160.